Okay, so previous video we see that how actually data flows in between state and props. So different components, how can they use? So we use actually this graph, this flow diagram. You see data is flowing from the top to bottom all the time from in each components. But in this video we will see how data goes from down to top. But before we do this, we need to understand actually the something called handlers. So handlers is working for event. You see the word event. So we need to understand how the event work, and then we can use this part. So event handler is very important part in Reactjs. So let's see what is event handler. Mainly it's related to event. That means if you already know JavaScript, basic JavaScript, you know the event means on click, on submit, on mouse over or mouse out, anything like this. That means you are clicking or doing something and some event is happening in this case, or some DOM, the DOM element is calling. So this kind of thing is called event, and in React.js we will use some function which will handle this event. That's why it's called event handler. So basically event handler in React.js is something that can handle the event, like as I said, HTML DOM. Event handler example could be on click, on submit, on change event. They must be camel case, not lowercase. So in event handler, if you look at this part, on click, on is a small letter, C is capital letter, and then we have on click. So on click is camel case. So it's like a camel, and if cannot in pure JavaScript or in HTML, you can write it in a small letter, all the things, there is no problem, then they will understand. But in React.js they have a little bit of differences. So if you have any event or event handler, then all the names from JavaScript is same, but they should be camel case. Yeah. So then as an example, simple example, we can see that the right way to actually use event handler is we have a button, we click there, and a function is calling. So you don't need to use function with a parenthesis bracket. Here you can use just curly bracket. That's enough. Inside curly bracket you write a function name, data name, or variable name, state name, whatever you write. It will the pure JavaScript. You can also write here JavaScript 1+1, something like this in JavaScript, that will be okay. And also this is for functional component. When it's a class component, then you need to use this keyword before the function name or state name. This is the right way. And then we can also see that the JSX curly bracket. So you see here is a curly bracket. We can send a function name for event handler, not like a string. So you don't need to put a double quotation or single quotation, because this on click event need curly bracket to understand or recognize a React.js event function or handler. So this is actually handler. Here you see function name. This could be our event handler for on click for this event. Yeah. So then the wrong way how people write, like sometimes in this is okay when it's just JavaScript, but in React.js you cannot write this way. So no double quotation. And here is an example of structure, how when you do it and what will happen. So you can also write it like this, curly bracket, and you write, you can send the whole event. That means when you click there, a event is called synthetic event in React.js. We will see this in also in example. And then when you click there, a function is calling, so any name could be okay, and then you can send data and event together by on click. You can also send only event also, that's okay. And then use this for the class component, as I said already. So passing argument in event handler is little tricky, because when you send arguments, you need to send it like this way, so as a data, or then also send sometimes the event, because by default if you don't use event and only send data, he is trying to send event and he will be confused with event and data. We'll see the example. So that means in a functional component also we need to write just this keyword, but rest of the part is same. Okay. And when we click on a button, in this case, so you see on this example and this example, only difference is this one has this keyword, but that one has no this keyword, because it's a class component. And the next one we see that this function name dot bind this dot data. This is actually happened before. This is like old code. Then whenever we call some event or something and the function is not connecting with the constructor in a class component, but that one you don't need because now you have arrow function. So this way you don't need to do it anymore, it's like the old way. Okay, so then here we will now see the code example. We'll try to create a event, small event handler, and then see how they are working. Okay, so if you see it already I have some code. Let's see the view. So in the code we have something like this: Facebook, Google, YouTube. We see that in my previous video how I can send some data from one to another one. So you don't need to understand this part, just look at my app.js. So there I have some state, some parts. So all these parts we don't need to even talk it. We just see a simple event first, how the event is working and what is event handler. Yeah, so let's look into this one. There I have a function like function app and something like this. Let me just reduce the extra things so you will not be confused if you don't see this video before. Okay, so what I have here, here I will make a button and I will click on the button, something will happen. So to do this I can actually remove the data that we don't need it. Yeah, so I will make it like just empty without anything. Yeah, and then let's see. So this is from the previous video. We can now remove them if we don't need them. Only the bootstrap link and this, and here I will write down just now how it looks like before we do anything. So it's empty, there is nothing, no code and the design. We'll write maybe a headings and say okay, event handler, and then we write down button, and this is a simple button you write, and then you write okay on click. So in the on click you see if I write down small letter like this is wrong, this will not work and they will show me error. And then you cannot write even quotation because it's a Reactjs, you need to write curly bracket for any function or any data is coming, and when you click there something will happen. So if I say okay click or maybe send something, yeah, so in this case first I need to fix this by C for even on click event. So then what I see here a function name, so I can write function name, any function name as my slide is saying. So in this case we will write down, so this is a functional component, you can write here a function name with a type. So we said okay constant send data. So this is the name of the function, then you use the arrow function, and inside arrow function you can write down what you want to see. So in this case if I click there, maybe I will see alert, just a alert which is showing okay event is clicked, just a simple message. And then here you need to call the function name send data, save it. Okay, now go again in the browser. So yeah, now if I click here I will see the alert, event is clicked. So this is very simple, you have event handler, first event handler, but this is for functional component. Now if it's a not functional component, if it's a class component, what will happen? In my example I also have a class component. Let me check which one is class component. Yeah, my header is a class component, and what I have in the, so this is a class component. If you don't understand this component, please check my previous video about class component and function component. So this is already a class component header, and we'll now try to create some button also here and see what will happen for the class component. So in this case what I will do, I will first call header with app.js. So let's call it here, we say header, it should be auto import, and yeah, in line 3 it's imported, save it, Then before we do anything, just look into this one, how it looks like. Okay, saying cannot read property welcome message undefined, because in the header component I have something called welcome message in a state. It's coming from a props, but I'm not using a props or doing something, that's why he's not sending anything. These two messages, for now we'll remove them. Yeah, so we'll not use any props for now, just to understand the event handler. So the class component, what we have generally in class component we have by default a constructor, but we don't need constructor in this case. And then we have a return. So return should be a little bit nested like this. So in a return you can write, okay, this is a class component of header. Let's create also a button here. This is a class component exactly same like the functional component. Now if I write here a message or something, like I say, okay, send, or we can say, yeah, we don't need actually any headings because we already have headings. Here I just need a button, so I can write a button, and in the button it should be on click also. So then in the on click, in this case now it's a class component. So compare with this one, how you will use. There we said send data, and then when you click something is happening. I will copy the same information. So and this one I will write down, okay, event is clicked for functional component, and now our event will click for class component. That would be the differences. Clicked for class component. But for class component, when you create an event handler, you don't need a type. So remember this, there is no type for class component event handler, but for functional component you must have it. And then when you use a class component send data, this same function you need to call with a keyword this, because every class component, this event handler is actually connecting with the binding with the constructor by default, we don't see it. So if you write this dot send data, and then they will connect. So in this case, now if I refresh, yeah, it's very small because here in the bottom I don't write anything. So if I write here, okay, send, and let's write some class name because I'm using Bootstrap. So if I write a class name, then it will be looks little better. I write button danger in this case. So now look at this one. So one is just the functional component. If you click here, you see clicked for functional component, okay. If I click this one, I see event is clicked for class component. So they have just small differences. In class component, we don't need a type for the event handler. So this is event handler, you don't need a type. Event handler, here you don't need a type. But for functional component, which is function, you need a type. This is first part, and the second part, in the functional component, when you call the function, invoke the function, you don't need to write anything extra, like no this keyword, no bracket like this. Yeah, but in class component, of course, you have to write this done send data, and then you can use it. So that is the main differences. Now the question is, now when I click this class component, I see this message. What if I click there and at the same time I want to send something here? Is it possible? Yeah, of course it's possible. So to do this, the way is a little bit different. Let's take it, cut it, and we call a arrow function, single line arrow function inside here, and then we call this dot send data, and then put some brackets. So by this structure, you call a function, but it's an arrow function, so function inside function invoke, and when you call this, then you can send data. So if you send here, like if I send here, if I write something here, maybe I want to send something called event or something called data. Maybe I need a variable here. So if I write down constant name equal to Arif. So and then I will send the name. So this is just a simple fixed variable. I send it and then I write here name, and let's see what will happen. So in this alert, I will comment the alert, or maybe I'll keep the alert, but this time I will write down name is. So name is something coming here as a data. You can also write a name if you like, name, and then write here name. Let's see what happened now for this class component. Yeah, so if I go to browser, I don't see any error, but if I click here, I see name is object. Okay, so name is coming, but is coming like something called object. Why? Because whatever I'm sending here is coming, that is coming in a object format. A lot of things is coming with this one. So we can console log and see what is inside the word name. Why it's become an object? Because I send a string, and you see here it's not actually light up, the color is not same. So we write it here, that is not actually happening, because we can see it now. So let's refresh it and then inspect it, because we need to see something from inspect. Click on the console log and click on the console, and then if I click here, I see something called synthetic base event. So that is what I am saying. The synthetic base event is actually a big part of React.js. Even you can write it here, synthetic base event, and then you will see a example in React.js website. I will provide this link in the below. So this is actually a more details on how it's working for the event handler. So this means actually whenever you are trying to send something, he is sending it, but inside something called synthetic event, a lot of protocols, rules, and different kinds of objects. So all the things that is related to the event is happening here. So you cannot see the name directly. Yeah, for this you need to use some different way, not this way. We can do it two ways, but let's try the first way. Let's say that before sending name, I am sending an event, comma. So what is happening now? Event is something I am sending by default, because until now they take name as an event, but now when you write event, and they understand. Okay, so let's remove this. I am sending an event. So by default, whenever I am calling this one, it has an event. And now I said okay, name. If I do this, or if I remove it, what will happen in this case? So I am not sending an event or nothing. I just make it empty arrow function and send name. And now let's see my console log. So clear this, and then if I click here, name is Arif. So now I am not sending any event or anything, just the data. But before that, whenever I write it name here, what happens? This name actually means the event that's created when you invoke this function, and name becomes event. They are sending like this way. If you want to send event and the data that you have, you can then write like something like this, event.name, and then when he is receiving, they need to also receive it like this. But yeah, in the general way, you don't have to do like this way. You send the name, that's enough. You don't need to write event or anything. But yeah, first see this, is it working still? So if I click, I still see Arif. That means it's still perfectly working, and there is no problem. Yeah, sometimes we need event handler if you have input or something. Like example, maybe when I click this button, I need a value. So value means maybe I have input or something, and from that input I need a value. So that part, how can I get the value of something? Yeah, so that's we need reference in other part that we will see in other video. But if you just assume that you have input and you click on the button on submit, and this need to send a lot of data, so that is will happen with event handler. Okay, so in this case we don't need this. We can just send data by this way, and then he is receiving the name. In a class component we do like this way. In functional component the part would be also same. There is no differences. So all you have to do is like this. Yeah, so you write the name of the empty arrow function, and let's write something without a variable. Here if I write arif, and the other part I write inside object, so now he will receive it like this. Name is coming manually arif, so we can display here the name is plus name. So then this name is now coming from, whenever I write it here, is coming from that one. Let's check the function component also for the same results. So it's working perfectly. But what is happening now, data is not going through one component to another one. He is actually going through just you click and inside the same component. Our next video we will see that how actually you can send data from top to from the bottom to top. That means when I will click here, I will take some data and I will send back this to Reactjs. So in this case we see that just event handler, and previous video we see how parent and child component is working. Next video we will see that okay, how child and parents will contact and how they can make something different.